Welcome to Raising an Athlete, where we discuss the best of sporting insights. I'm Amita Malhotra, founder Equal Sports, and today we have an important episode focusing on a very crucial but often overlooked aspect of athletic development, which is sports psychology. Today, I'm thrilled to speak with Nanaki Chadha. Nanaki is an internationally acclaimed chartered sport and performance psychologist under the British Psychological Society. Nanki's experience includes providing sports psychology support to athletes across a broad spectrum of age groups and skill levels, ranging from grassroots to national and international levels, and across sports such as cricket, golf, football, shooting, and many others. In this conversation, we'll learn more about sports psychology and how it can help athletes elevate their performance and well being, and how parents can support their young athletes in their journey. Nanki, welcome to Raising an Athlete. Thank you so much for making time for this.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Nanki, I think we'll start with your journey. You've been an athlete yourself, and it would be interesting to know your backstory of your childhood. What prompted you to be in sports?
Yeah, so my childhood from a very young age, I was involved in sports, um, whether it was swimming or tennis. I started with tennis, actually playing competitive tennis at the age of 10. Played that for a few years, but then I made the transition into golf. And I played golf for an approximate 12, 13 years at the national level. Played the IGU circuit competitively. So yes, my childhood has been pretty much involved in sports.
So, what would have been the provocation? Was it someone in your family? Was it something about the background? Somebody else was playing sports in your family? What do you feel was the provocation for you to play sports?
I would just say it was my dad who pushed me into sports. He always wanted me to get involved in some activity and a particular sport for sure. He used to play golf himself, so that's when he told me to give golf a try. That's when I made the transition from tennis to golf. So my golfing career to play for so many years and at the IGU level competitively, I think that was my dad pushing me there.
Okay. And then what inspired you to become a sports psychologist?
So that's quite an interesting story, I would say. Like I mentioned earlier, I was an athlete, played sport, but somehow I was unable to transfer my performance during competitions. So I was technically very sound. During practice rounds, I used to shoot really good scores, but as soon as it used to come under pressure or had to perform at important competitions, that's where I used to crumble under pressure. So I think my I couldn't really handle the pressure that the sport brought with it. The whole notion of an athlete must succeed and must win. The constant emphasis on the outcome. So I guess that's something that held me back from really achieving my optimal performance in golf. And that's one big reason why I didn't take it up professionally. During that time, I was doing my college from Jesus and Mary. I was pursuing psychology. And then after that, I took a gap year. After my undergrad, I took a gap year to really figure out what I want to do in my career. Do I want to play golf professionally or I want to do something else? So that's when I really took that 1 year to explore my options and I decided uh, I'm not that great in handling the pressure. So that might stop me from really playing at a certain high level. So why not? And at that time, it's not like I did not look for sports psychologists in the country, but I didn't come across anyone qualified. So that's when I decided, why don't I combine my passion for sports, because that's what I knew growing up, and with the psychology of degree, why don't I combine the two and pursue something so niche and very much needed within the sporting ecosystem.
Can you tell our viewers what sports psychology is?
Yes, absolutely. Sports psychology is a specialized line and a field within the broad realm of psychology, which specifically is to do with sporting performance. So, by sporting performance, what I mean is it helps athletes to manage and cope with the challenges that sport brings upon themselves in a more effective manner. So, it's mainly working and helping athletes to reach their optimal performance. So sports psychology basically helps, if I give you the broader themes, would help athletes build confidence, manage their stress and anxiety, focus better on ground, their thought process, so thinking in a more positive and a helpful manner. So these are some of the areas that sports psychology helps athletes deal with, cope up with, so that then they can go on to the field and reach their optimal performance.
Right. And what are the biggest barriers that you see in terms of adoption of sports psychology?
I feel the biggest barrier, and I think the stigma attached to the whole aspect of psychology, I think also gets into sports psychology. That what I mean is the whole mental health, or there's nothing wrong with me mentally, you know, that
Yeah.
I need to go to a psychologist or a sports psychologist. But by saying that, what I mean is that sports psychology doesn't, you don't only have to go to a sports psychologist when there's an issue. It can be as simple as that an athlete has reached a certain level and wants to improve or go on to the next. So it can be something that helps you develop certain skills so that it can help you reach a much higher level than what you already are at.
Right, because that's something that I wanted to know. That is it like need based when you hit a difficult spot or you're having a problem, or is it a more holistic part of the practice? And in terms of your own practice, I'm sure it's both in some ways. But what do you see more commonly, or what is the use case more oftenly used for sports psychology?
For sports psychology, and I can talk about myself as a practitioner, I do like to take a more holistic approach with my clients and with my athletes. But usually, what I see is mostly athletes are coming to me when there is a problem or when the performance is not being transferred onto the field. And that's when even parents approach you. But it's not necessarily that you need to approach a sports psychologist when things are going wrong. It can be as simple, like I mentioned earlier, that if an athlete, for example, an athlete is making a transition from your amateur to your professional level, or wanting to up their skill, or they have reached a certain performance level, which is really good, but they feel, okay, from here, where next? How can I improve further? So it can be as simple as I'm wanting to improve myself further, rather than saying, okay, this is an issue that I have and I need a quick fix or a quick solution to it. So,
Got it.
definitely taking a more holistic approach, which is performance as well as the well being aspect of the athlete as well, which is often somewhere missed out on.
So help me understand this. I think there must be there is likely a barrier of time and resources because as an athlete there are so many things to focus on. I mean, already you have your drill of technique, then you have to think about nutrition, and if you're still a young athlete, which means you have academics and other imperatives to take care of.
Absolutely.
So how does one even pursue it holistically? Because how do you make time for it? Is it something, how does the practice entail? Does it need a lot of time sitting with you where you'd have a conversation? What does it really look like?
That's a very important and a valid question that you've asked. And a lot of athletes who come to me actually do struggle with this, managing studies and their sport, because now sports getting more and more technical. The sports science aspect of it is coming. By that, when I say sports science, it's about going to working on your physical fitness, physios, recovery, nutritionists, sports psychologist. So there's a full-fledged team that the athlete is working um, with, and that surely does require time. Now, coming to sports psychology specifically, how I work with athletes, I usually start work. Usually, what I say is that initially meet the athlete once a week. So first session would be an assessment session where we understand what are the athlete's strengths, what are their weaknesses, and what are some of the areas we want to work on. Based on that, a tailor-made plan for the athlete, because one size doesn't fit all. Towards the main goal is to make the athlete more independent, and as we proceed further, to increase the gap between my sessions. So by saying the time that sports psychology would require, I would say in one-on-one meeting me, it would be once a week, or any other sports psychologist. But again, if we see our mind as a muscle, it needs to be developed. It's not a quick fix. It's not something a few sessions would make somebody mentally strong or build confidence. We need to see it more like a process. So, like an athlete works regularly on the technical aspect, the physical aspect, mental aspect is also an aspect that needs to be included. But what I can say is that it doesn't require hours and hours of practice, but even if on a daily basis we give it half an hour, that can help athletes change their mindset for the better.
Okay. So there are drills and skills that you'd pass to them. Counseling would form one part of it where you're really having that conversation, but it is probably going to be homework or skills that they need to build, and maybe probably they come back and report to you on how they're doing on that.
Yes, absolutely. Because again, if you see another aspect of sports psychology in comparison to your general psychology or counseling, is that at the end, these skills need to be transferred on ground to result in an optimal performance. Whereas general counseling also requires work. I'm not saying general counseling does not require work, but it's more about your day-to-day life coping with things. But in sports specifically, there are drills that need to be transferred onto the golf course or onto a cricket pitch. So that requires a bit of effort and time and commitment from the athlete.
Also, Nanki, if you can share, at what age should one, go in for sports, into the building consciously the mental aspect? And I'm specifically asking in terms of, young athletes, which is children. At what age group is it appropriate for them?
That's again a very great question, and often that parents do ask me, or even coaches for that matter. I would say they can start young, and when they start competing. So I would say anywhere around the age of 10 years old, they can start. Now, why I say that is because when you're at a young age, that's a tender age, when your mindset is being built, your thought process, your belief system is being formulated. So, if we start young and start molding the younger athletes in the right manner, teach them at a very young age what is a good way or the helpful way of thinking, we can we can actually remove quite a bit of the rigid mindset that is formed over time. By rigid mindset, what I mean is a lot of older athletes would have a certain set of beliefs or a set of way, a very set way to do things, which might be hampering them. But at an older or as you become more and more elite, it might become more uncomfortable or difficult for you to make that change. However, at a younger age, if we can mold it, can alter it, it's more helpful so that it doesn't cause them distress or any issues at a later stage in life.
Do you also work with parents of young athletes? My perception is that sometimes, the children may be too young to, understand or, adopt what's being said just mentally, or might pick it up with, let's say, their parents or coaches. Do you feel that it helps, or do you work with parents of, young aspiring athletes to counsel them, or for them to be able to support the journey of their young athletes?
Yes, absolutely. I do work with parents who are forthcoming and willing also to work. I do believe that the athlete's environment also plays an important role, and parents, it's the parents' role. They are the initial stakeholders in a athlete's life who push them into towards sports. So that's how they really begin sports. So I do feel parents can have a big impact and do have an impact on the athletes or the kids' journey. As simple as what they say to the athlete, how they say, how they conduct themselves, their own behavior can be projected on the athlete as well as their emotions. So, for example, if a parent is anxious before a competition, that can easily get transferred onto the athlete. So, it is very, very important also to work with the parents specifically and other stakeholders within the athlete's sporting ecosystem. So, I do definitely work with parents um, who are willing to work and travel with athletes during their competitions.
Got it. What are some of the most common issues or challenges that athletes come to you with, and how do you help them overcome these?
I think I've addressed and had athletes with a broad range of concerns and issues, but the common overarching themes that really come forefront, like I've been mentioning, is the transference skills, right? Are they able to transfer their skills from training onto the court? That's one. Saying that, of course, one big concern is managing pressure, handling and managing pressure, stress, anxiety. So, a pattern that I've seen with athletes is their emotions and their behaviors change from 1 week before the competition to the night or the morning of. So, as they come closer to the competition, thought process, their emotions, and their behaviors are altered. So, for instance, an athlete might not feel anything a week before the competition. But as we come closer, some athletes then one night before the competition cannot even sleep. They have sleeping issues, cannot eat. So, managing that is also a common concern. Sleep is a big, big, big issue and a concern that is starting to increase among young kids or overall amongst athletes.
I was asking you in context of the fact that we mostly see sports psychology as something being offered to the elite athletes, so they're part of, they have access to, the sporting authorities where this is built in as part of the curriculum. But when it comes to developmental athletes, they are in a way on their own. So it is their own initiative if they want to take up. In your own practice, do you see this being delivered more through the sporting federations? I'm sure you work with federations yourself, or do you see more solo athletes come to you? And how does that differ from, let's say, other countries or rest of the world, how it's practiced?
Okay. What I would say is from my own personal experience, like you said, of course, the federations do have a sports psychologist in-house, but it's not something compulsory that athletes have to go to. It's somebody who's there and as and when they feel like. But what I would say is now the with the awareness that has increased, more individual athletes are seeking support. So I feel there's still a very big trend of individual athletes coming rather than through the organization.
Right. What are the biggest misconceptions about sports psychology?
The biggest misconception I would say is that it's a quick fix, that going to a psychologist one session would bring drastic change. I think that's one big misconception. I'm not saying sports psychology doesn't help, but like I mentioned, it's a muscle that needs to be developed, which cannot be developed overnight. Another misconception is that it guarantees wins. So, of course, it helps you cope with things better, with your pressure better. But we need to remember that sport has different aspects: the technical, the physical, and the mental. And when all these three things together fit as a puzzle, that's when optimal performance comes in. So, it's not only solely that sports psychology can guarantee a win. I would say, and sports psychology does not only work on your weaknesses, like I mentioned earlier in the episode, it's also working on your strengths, developing a certain level of skill sets, and improving what you already have. So it's not only working on your weaknesses, it's also working on your strengths.
Right. So I want to ask you that critics argue that instead of allowing kids to solve their problems independently, parents today often resort to structured solutions like therapy or sports psychology. How do you balance the benefits of these structured approaches with the need for kids to actually develop their own problem solving skills. And this I'm extending from generally the understanding of therapy or psychology out there to say that, there's a lot of, in a way, mollycoddling that's happening where, there would be a comparison with the past where you learned the hardware along, you had to do the hard stuff. What's your thought on that?
I completely agree. I completely agree there, but I would like to clarify that getting your kids to therapy it doesn't mean that we are answering on their behalf. So, how therapy works is that we make the athlete more aware, self aware. It's more like an awareness process of finding yourself, exploring what your thoughts are, what your feelings are. And we are giving them a few tools to help them cope with things better. But at the end, our ultimate goal is to make the athletes or the client completely independent. By that, what I'm saying is helping them or teaching them ways in which they can actually go tackle different situations that they find themselves in. So it's not that they're coming to us and we are giving them straight away answers. It's more like an exploring process. And in that exploration, somewhere the athlete or the client themselves come with their own solutions. So it's solution oriented, but it's us taking the athlete or the individual on this journey to find those answers themselves. And we are just there guiding them and probing them to reach those answers.
Also, if you can help us understand, how does sports psychology work in practical terms? Like, if you could give an example of a technique or an exercise that you might use with an athlete.
Okay. So there are quite a range of techniques that can be used, but specifically on ground, one that I can mention is called the exposure technique. Now, that's something comes much later in the therapy process, once the classroom sessions are done, and how can we take these skills and apply it on the course. Now, in the exposure technique, what we do is we put athletes specifically in situations that they might fear. Now, specifically giving you an example from golf. Now, if an athlete fears the bunker, we will put them in the bunker and expose them in that. The main reason in doing that is to firstly make them more familiar about their thoughts in that situation that result in the fear. So basically here, by exposing the athlete to the uncomfortable situations, makes them actually realize that if we keep doing it in training, practicing it on a regular basis, the fear is removed one day. So it's basically avoiding running away from situations or not engaging in avoidance behavior, but actually facing your fears in training, practicing them so that when these situations appear or you face in a competition, you're well rehearsed and you're confident. So that's one technique that we use where we on ground take athletes, expose them, and of course we do explore their thought process in that situation, the emotions, and then we teach them to reverse those cognitions. We restructure them, change them so that they feel much better and engage in that situation in a more helpful manner.
Right. And it must be quite a process, sort of bringing out the unsaids, because one is what the athlete may say to you, but the other is something that they never tell you, but you have to sort of bring that out, the unsaid of the fears.
Absolutely, and that's where the challenge is for sure. Because we work on the information that is given to us by the athlete or the stakeholders around, like parents, coaches. But yes, that's where observation comes in. So, wherever given a chance or an opportunity, I do like to see the athletes in their sporting habitat.
Got it.
So, playing a competition so that I can observe what exactly goes on.
Right. What's a surprising or some kind of an unconventional mental exercise that you recommend to athletes that they actually might not think is as effective, but it really works?
Mm-mm-mm. That's a good one, actually. Just like adding some breathing exercises, like a deep breath. when their muscles are tightening or just in their pre-shot routine. And I've often got, okay, taking a deep breath, how that will really help. But when they do it on ground, I have had feedback from athletes that yes, it did help us relax our muscles. Or it's an activity that anytime their mind is getting distracted or going here and there, that one deep breath brings the focus back to themselves, which they don't realize until they really apply it and see its effect on ground. It doesn't solve the solution. There's more groundwork that needs to be done, the deeper work that needs to be done. But at that point in time, in on ground, how can one deep breath be effective is really key.
Yeah, that's an interesting one because there's stuff that you think is very simple or boring, but sometimes you have to enforce and actually do simple and boring stuff to see, you know, things
Yeah,
working.
no,
Um,
absolutely.
can you share any success stories or examples of how sports psychology has significantly helped an athlete's performance, their well-being?
I would say there are a few stories in the media. I think athletes have now started coming out and speaking a lot about mental health, creating awareness. So I would say few interviews by Virat Kohli, how he, um how working on his mind really helped him deal with the pressure. There was an article where he did not want to play cricket for a while, and he actually did not pick up the bat for a good amount of time and took a break from that. So I think that's a story where he went, took a break, came back, was recharged and performed. From the golfing history, there is Rory McIlroy. In his 2019 interview with one of the news channels, he actually said that there's been a big shift in his perspective of how he used to put a lot of pressure on himself that I have to win, I need to win, I must win. But now he's changed his perspective and the language and the wording, what he says to himself, that has really helped him become more consistent and successful as a golfer. So from not demanding or saying I must win, I have to win, he's like, yes, I would like to win, I would wish to win, I would prefer to win. So just small changes in language can really be helpful.
Right. Tell us, what are the qualities of a winner? Like, what does it take to be, in terms of your mental strength? What are those some attributes or skills that it takes to become a winning athlete?
That's a very good question, and I feel every individual has its own characteristics that make them the athlete they are and the success that they achieve. But I would say one main characteristic and a key characteristic that I personally feel is very important for an athlete to be successful is discipline. And by discipline, what I mean is being consistent in their routines, doing things in a more systematic manner, being disciplined with their routines, being committed to their routines as well. I would say discipline and committed. So I would say even where sports psychology is concerned, now right after a session, a one-on-one session with the therapist is not going to get you results until and unless you take those uh, activities and those tools out and commit to it and apply it on a regular basis.
Right. I'm going to shift gears and come specifically in context of concerns that parents may really have, parents of aspiring athletes. So, for those parents who are new to the concept of sports psychology, what are some first steps that they can take to support their children's mental development in sports?
I would say first and foremost would be to actually understand the importance of the mental aspect, understand, become more self-aware of how this can help their child, and also to identify or to work closely with the sports psychologist to understand how they themselves can work o- on their language or behavior or emotions so that it's not transferred on to the athlete. So I think the development of the athlete and the parents in this particular aspect needs to go hand in hand because the athlete might be seeing me once a week, but is in that environment regularly, where there are parents, coaches, and the other stakeholders. So I think it's very, very important for parents also to understand what does a supportive environment looks like, what to do, what not to do, what to say, what not to say. So I think it all has to start with creating more self-awareness as well.
Right. So, what does a supportive environment look like? Often as parents, you're told, like, parents tend to put a lot of pressure, expectations. Also, in times of social media, where there's a lot of validation to be made with the world outside. Having said that, it's hard at that moment because you may have put in a lot of effort. The kid may have put in a lot of effort. There are expectations that you have. How
Yeah.
do parents work on their own expectations? Any techniques or anything that can help them understand, how do they manage their expectations and not pass, their own emotions to the child?
That's a very important question that you've asked, but I would again say there's no simple answer to that or a simple technique. It's again like we are exploring with the athlete their own expectations, helping them deal with their own emotions and behaviors. I think it's a similar pathway with parents. To start with the self-awareness process, because still parents themselves are not aware of what they say, what they do. Some parents might not be even aware of their behaviors or the language that they use. As simple as before a competition saying, you better not lose, you better win. A simple phrase like that can be creating pressure on the athlete. So, again, there is no simple technique, but it is more about starting, understanding the process that, okay, what is it that I do, say, or behave that might not be helping my child? So that's something, it's again an exploration work, a process that needs to be done with parents and children together and separately, that can then help make them a more supportive environment for the athlete, so that the expectations of parents are not passed on onto the athlete, causing them the pressure.
Right. So, in terms of language, if I may ask, what are the things that, you have a big tournament? What should the parent be saying to the child? What should the parent not be saying to the child?
So just to give you a bit of a background, language. So language is vast. So but simple phrases like there is constant emphasis by parents on that you must win, you should not lose. You have to win. So this is called the demanding language. It's a do or die situation. You must win, you cannot lose. You have to win. So words like must, have to, need to, and not often cause this notion that an athlete should either succeed or perish, and that mediocrity is not acceptable. So this is a certain amount of language that is very prevalent in sport. How we can change it, again, that's again a process. But if we can change or alter these words, have to, need to, by saying, okay, I would like you to win today. I would like you to give your full effort. I wish you do this. So rather than having those rigid words, having like, okay, I would like you to.
Right.
But also, rather than just having a tunnel vision and focusing on the outcome, that you need to shoot a particular score or you need to win, it can be more about the process. That go out there, have fun. Go out there, give your 100%. How many of us actually, when we put our kids into sport, they start having fun because of the social environment. They're meeting friends, they're making friends. But as they get more and more competitive, how often do we really tell them, okay, go enjoy your sport? The focus becomes a lot on the outcome, that you have to win, have to win, have to win. Somewhere that enjoyment aspect is lost. So I think it's very, very important for parents to also understand that the enjoyment element needs to be there. Otherwise, the dropout rate will be very high. At a certain point, the child will stop enjoying the sport and drop out from their sport.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point you make, that the love for the game or the fun of the game has to stay. Otherwise,
Absolutely.
while routines are important, but if you juice out really the soul of it, then precious little is going to be left. at the end of it.
Yeah. Uh,
Um, what can parents do to support children in maintaining the balance between their sporting commitments and academic or other responsibilities, because there's quite a handful, and at least the Indian system, even till day, there's a lot of focus on academics, because I hear
yeah.
of instances in other countries where the athletes, the mainstay of their day is going to be around the sport that they're playing, and probably in the afternoon there'll be, let's say, specialized classes that are happening for them to make sure that their academic imperatives are met. But in India, that's not really the case, which means that you're really always sailing both the boats. How can parents help with the same?
Actually, like I mentioned, it is a challenge. It is a challenge because of our system, the pressure that comes from school as well. I think the starting point for this is that each athlete needs to make a structured routine. A lot of student athletes who come to me, they don't have structured routines. By that, what I mean is they don't have day-to-day planning in terms of tuitions, practice, gym. So I feel one night before sleeping, planning your day the next day, or over the weekend, planning your rest of your week can really, really help athletes reduce that burden to a certain degree. Then, when they have it all charted down, they know exactly what fits where and how much time they have. It's very important also to give themselves break in between. We are not machines, we are human beings. I think that's also something that needs to be remembered because an athlete is running from tuition to their practice. But do they have a free recovery day in the middle? So I think it's all about coming up with structured, realistic routines. I'll emphasize on the word realistic. Putting things in one day that can easily be done. So I think that should be the starting point to manage things. Because just verbally or keeping it in your mind, that's also stress because the athlete's like, now what? Or you'll be missing classes or you'll be delayed. So having those routines in a diary, in a written format can really help ease out the burden for the athletes and the parents as well.
Lovely. So that's a important tip. Again, one of those things, simple but effective, where you
Same,
keep
yeah.
those routines and you make sure you take breaks, which goes a long way in keeping the journey sustainable. There's this perception that today's young people, and I'm extending that to, let's say, young athletes, are more privileged. I'm conscious that I'm saying this for people coming from a certain background, but they're more privileged and less used to hardships compared to previous generations. Do you think this is true? And if so, how does this impact their approach to sports and competitions?
I would agree with that, definitely with the current newer generation, I would say, and youngsters. Of course, they are in a more protective environment, I would say. The parents are more protective. So, somewhere that does kind of impact them in being more independent, if I say so. So, are they confident enough to travel on their own for an event? Of course, there is that safety element to it, but can they travel on their own? Can they handle things on their own? Or do we have parents always, you know, sorting things out for them? For example, during a competition, in most sports it's not allowed, but are the parents uh, going and talking to the officials more, or it's the athlete fighting their own battles? With less involvement of the parents. So I definitely feel the current generation is, how to put it, what would the right word be? Not as rough and tough as the previous one, if that's the right word. More privileged for sure, coming from a certain background. More protected for sure, and I won't blame parents there because, of course, the safety element and the environment not being as safe or as earlier. But I would say still in occasions making their athletes more independent in terms of decision making process while traveling. Be there to support them, but let them do it rather than doing it for them. So I feel that can be one approach rather than saying no, they need to travel alone or not do that. I wouldn't advise that. But be there as a support system, but let them do things a little on their own, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. So important message for parents, let children be more independent. They will fall like they did when they were little toddlers, but they will learn more resiliently to get up and, fight their own battles. Uh,
Absolutely.
I think I'll shift back to the perspective of the athletes themselves. Are there any particular signs or patterns that suggest an athlete is struggling mentally with their sport? And they actually, I know you said that this is not only need based, but that they might have need to take support from a sports psychologist.
So it can be anything. It can be athlete feeling that they are unable to deal with situations around them, feeling a little overwhelmed. Anything they feel, it can be anything that they feel that they are having difficulty in coping and would require that support to help them cope with things better. So I won't say there's one pertaining issue, but it can be anything. It can be sport related, it can be also personal. Sometimes the athlete might not realize that. So it can be at any point with any concern where the athlete feels that a particular concern is hampering their day to day functioning or, for that matter, their sporting performance, can definitely seek help and reach out.
Right. How do you help athletes cope with the pressure of big games or competitions?
Um, Again, like I said, it's again a process. So the first session, assessment, understanding what are the challenges they face, what are their thought processes and emotions, and based on that, equipping them with certain techniques and one would be emotional regulation. So making them more emotionally regulated, of how they can manage better with their emotions. An athlete comes with confidence issues, so how to build their confidence going into a match. Like I mentioned, sleep, if an athlete has sleep concerns, how can we improve their sleep quality so that it doesn't impact them physically and they feel fresh for their sport?
Can you recommend any resources, any books, or any exercises, websites that parents and young athletes can start using, to bolster their mental strength? Any books that you enjoyed reading? I mean, not specifically, theory of sports psychology, but it could be written by an athlete or any such resource that you've enjoyed reading that you'd like to share.
Uh, I'm currently reading this book called Maybe You Should Ask for Help. So it's actually about a therapist going to a therapist. So it's a light read. It's quite interesting, and it kind of gives you an insight into what happens in a therapy room, what some misconceptions, whatever we've spoken about today. It's quite a light read, I would say. So that's a fun read.
Right. And just one more question around resources. So finding a good sports psychologist itself is a task, or any resources around sports psychology services. Is there anything that you can point where people can find and access?
Unfortunately, we don't have a directory for sports psychologists specifically. That is a question, and a lot of people do ask me. It is something that we need to keep searching or word of mouth. One advice that I can give to individuals when looking for a sports psychologist is to find a qualified one. By qualified, what I mean is at least the minimum education requirement should be a master's in sports psychology from a recognized and a reputed university. Because why I'm saying this is because I've had a few cases where athletes have come to me and they've had very bad experiences with sports psychologists. And when I've inquired, those individuals did not even turn out to be sports psychologists. So I think it's very, very important to, when you're looking for a sports psychologist, to look at the education and also the work experience.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nanki, for sharing your insights today. So, message for all parents who are watching this: there are no quick fixes when it comes to your mental abilities. As is the case with physical, you got to work on it. You got to stay committed, and discipline and good routines can take you and your children a long way. So, thanks so much for sharing all these insights, and we will be back with another episode very soon. Thank you.
Thank you.